reached here. And what are the Democrats doing today? Where are the Democrats? Are they in the Senate today? No, they're out campaigning. While critical SNAP benefits run dry, the Democrats have skipped town. They've abandoned their post in the Senate, and the reason that's so important and noteworthy for the American people is the Senate is the only place where this can end. The last hope of reopening the government before millions of Americans go hungry. They've abandoned their post. Democrats are now this is the incredible part, they're now trying to somehow blame Republicans for cutting off SNAP when Republicans, remember, are the ones who have voted 14 times for the SNAP benefits to flow. It's the Democrats who voted every single time to turn that off. The same Democrats who've been perfectly fine with defunding SNAP and WIC for over a month now are suddenly claiming to be outraged that Republicans and President Trump can't just wave some magic wand and fix the mess that they themselves have created. If they're suddenly waking up to the pain their reckless decision is causing, then there's one simple way to fix it. They can come back in here and vote to reopen the government. But we don't think they're going to do that. Now, this is what's interesting. The most recent development is that you've got many more people now calling on the Senate Democrats to do the right job. There's a handful of moderates still in the Democrat Party, and they are very upset about that. The tension is rising. You had Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, for example, who just yesterday, I think it was, accused his own party of, quote, playing chicken with the food security of 42 million Americans. He's right. And you've seen now the avalanche of people and organizations and institutions calling on the Democrats to reopen the government and vote for the clean CR. You got labor unions. You got the largest airlines in America. You got independent voters. Working class Americans across the country, they are all pleading with the Democrats to do their job and stop using their hardships, the people's hardships, for the Democrats' political games in Washington. Yesterday, there was a lot said, written about an editorial that was in the Washington Post. I commend it to your reading if you haven't seen that. But it reads in part just one line out of that. I would like to stand up here and read you the whole thing. The Washington Post, as you know, is not generally on my side. They said, quote, Democrats openly acknowledge that they refuse to do this, reopen the government, because it would mean giving up their leverage. If they persist, it will mean families start to go hungry. Now, look, this isn't some novel idea. As you know, the Democrats have always traditionally said, breathlessly, given speeches passionately saying that you've got to keep the government funded. You should never shut it down. It would be so dangerous. And we've recounted this over and over. I mean, I literally could be here all day reading the Democrats' own past statements on the perils of shutting down the government, but I'm just going to highlight a couple this morning because they're relevant and timely. I'll begin with Senator Coons. He's the senior Democrat senator from Delaware. In 2013, he said this, quote, our democracy cannot function if the majority party threatens to shut down the government unless it gets its way, unquote. And that was Senator Coons in 2013. And what is he saying now? Earlier this week, he said, quote, frankly, this is our only moment of leverage. Quite a switch. Bernie Sanders has got a lot of airtime here lately, and back in 2018, Senator Bernie Sanders said this, quote, the truth is that shutting down the government is a serious and dangerous action that we must do everything possible to prevent. That was in 2018. You know what he said this month? Quote, if we reopen the government, we lose our leverage. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse in 2013. The shutdown was, quote, entirely unnecessary and has harmed our economy and our reputation in the world. But if we also can't forget, we must never again allow extremist hostage-taking to create this kind of disruption. That was 2013. Just days ago, the senator from Rhode Island said the opposite. It's the only lever we have, meaning the shutdown. What he means is that the pain of the American people is their political lever. I guess he's forgotten his cries of alarm over the extremist hostage-taking. And how about the House? And infamously now, we all know, the Democrat whip, Catherine Clark, the second highest ranking Democrat in the House, said, quote, just last year, she said, they are taking a non-issue, a false flag, and saying this is the reason we can't proceed. It is a dangerous precedent to be threatening a shutdown. That's what she said in 2024. And what'd she say about a week ago? The opposite, quote, Of course, there will be families that are going to suffer here, but it's one of the few leverage times we have. Many House members have echoed the same hypocrisy, and I'm not going to waste our time with it this morning, but I do want to leave you with this quote from Chuck Schumer, because he is the actual architect of the shutdown. He is the one that is preventing the Senate Democrats from doing the right thing. In March of this year, as you know, he voted on the same CR to avert a shutdown. And he said then, quote, in his speech on the Senate floor and in a bunch of interviews, this is what he said on the Senate floor, quote, the CR was certainly bad, but a shutdown would be 15 or 20 times worse. It was a vote of principle. And today, Chuck Schumer, entirely void of principle, by his own estimation, said, quote, every day gets better for his party. Tell that to the millions of American families facing a hunger crisis now as a direct result of his failed leadership and shenanigans. Those Democrats have all collectively voted 14 times over the last several weeks to reject the clean continuing resolution to fund the government, and they've made it abundantly clear they're going to continue to do that, to hold the American people hostage, so long as it serves their political interest to look tough to the leftist radicals in their base. Republicans have done our part to end the government, the Democrat shutdown, and now it's time for Democrats to do theirs. The path forward is simple. Please, please, every American who is concerned about this, every American that is feeling the harm, you should call the Senate Democrats and tell them to stop the nonsense. Echo the voices of the unions, of the airlines, of hardworking people everywhere, and tell them to stop doing this and open the government. We have to do that. 42 million Americans are set to miss meals starting tomorrow, and this should be the easiest vote they've ever taken in their lives. I don't want to belabor this point any longer, because I'm delighted to introduce you to our guest for the daily press conference here. Everybody knows Brooke Rollins, the incomparable, as I call her, the incomparable Brooke Rollins. She leads the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and of course her department operates and oversees SNAP benefits to all these tens of millions of Americans. We're fortunate to have her here today. She's going to talk about the devastating effects of the Democrats' decisions on all this, and I'm delighted to give her the podium now. Brooke, so thanks so much for being here, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mike, Mr. Speaker. Really great to be here with everyone. I was reminded I was in the Speaker's backyard in Louisiana over the weekend and on Friday, and we went to a restaurant there, and our waiter by the name of Joe was wonderful. He was a multi-generational Louisiana and New Orleans, and he was our server, and he was just so impressive. And towards the end, he brought up that, well, this is a job he had to take because he was furloughed and so was not making any money, and he worked for the federal government. He didn't know who I was. And I said, well, Joe, I can appreciate that. You know, I'm sort of in that world as well. And I said, where do you work? And he said, well, I work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in their New Orleans office as part of the financial team. And so it just really brought home for me, to echo what Mike said, just thanking so many thousands of federal workers who are showing up, who are still doing their job, who aren't getting paid, those that are now concerned about putting food on the table and making their mortgages and paying their rent, but to be out in the country, I was in Indiana yesterday, and understand the real sort of pain that's being felt. But just to echo a couple of the themes that Speaker Johnson talked about, again, the idea that the Democrats have now for 14 different votes voted to keep the government closed is absolutely unconscionable. Every day they hold the federal government hostage. They are leaving millions of families' livelihoods and critical benefits, including SNAP, hanging in the balance. Of course, we all know the 13,000 air traffic controllers working without pay, many turning to Uber, taking second jobs in restaurants, etc., as this shutdown continues. Hundreds of thousands of federal employees are not receiving a paycheck. Thousands of small business loans are going unapproved each month because of the shutdown, equating to almost $4 billion in capital being taken out of the pockets of small business owners across this country, truly the backbone of our economy. It is a fact that Democrats shut down the government over free health care for illegal aliens and their $1.5 trillion partisan wish list. Democrats need to stop playing politics with the livelihoods of hardworking Americans and open the government now by voting for the clean resolution. We are here today because SNAP benefits run dry tomorrow. So the truth has finally revealed itself, hasn't it? Democrat support for programs like SNAP is now reduced to cynical control over people's lives. This last month has shown that the party who constantly says it puts people over politics does the complete opposite. Millions of Americans, as of tomorrow, will no longer receive SNAP and potentially WIC or even a paycheck. Democrats have instigated a disgusting dereliction of duty unlike anything I have seen in all my years doing this work, all to favor illegal aliens and other radical far-left policies that benefit only a small, tiny sliver of their base. I am embarrassed for Chuck Schumer. He is going out of his way to please the likes of Zohran Mamdani, a man who is polarizing America with his socialist rhetoric and anti-American principles. The very essence of government responsibility is to the citizens who live and work here to protect their interests first, unless you are a Democrat in the United States Senate. Chuck Schumer and the Democrats are doing all this because they fear the socialists and the radicals to their left. Ironically, in leaving American families hungry and American children without food, they are giving a preview of what those socialists will do to every one of us if they ever take power. What you're really seeing here is the end of the Democrats as a responsible party of government, a party that ends governance, a party that ignores Americans, a party that cannot master the most basic principles and processes of government, is a party that cannot be trusted with the reins of power. It isn't oriented toward anything but the end of the system in which it exists. SNAP is arguably just the beginning. The logical and inevitable end to where this all goes is the Democrats and the whole superstructure of constitutional government. President Trump has made it clear, reopen the government, get government funding back on solid footing, restore the confidence of American families who count on programs like SNAP, and stop treating them and their well-being as pawns in a political game, according to the Democrats. Prioritize American citizens, prioritize American families, and prioritize American children. I would like to make a quick note and then want to obviously leave lots of time for questions. Yesterday, I was in Indiana, and I was visiting a soybean farm, a sixth-generation soybean farm, the Everetts. And they have about 1,500 acres right outside of Indianapolis. We were harvesting corn, but they also do soybeans. And as I was there, it occurred to me that what President Trump has been doing over the last week or weeks in fighting across the world to open up markets for American farmers, for American families, while the Democrats are back here playing political games. It must stop. We must get the government open, and our citizens and these voters and our taxpayers and our families and our children expect no less. Thank you all.
All right, take a few questions. Chad, go ahead. You're standing up in the back. Go ahead.
Hello, Chad.
This question for the Secretary. The minority leader in the House said yesterday, Hakeem Jeffries, that the term he used was lying, that some of these SNAP benefits couldn't be liberated. Can you explain, refute that, give us your perspective, what their perspective is, and what your argument is, why it is?
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to explain that. So the fact that the Democrats are saying, but wait, USDA has money in their accounts, why it is really their fault, I've seen it over and over and over from some of their leaders, is absolute false. false and it is a lie. We have been saying on October 10th, we sent messages out. On October 24th, we sent messages out. These benefits end on November 1st. Now, let me get down into a little bit of the details on that to better explain. So there is a contingency fund at USDA, but that contingency fund, by the way, doesn't even cover, I think, half of the $9.2 billion that would be required for November SNAP, but it is only allowed to flow if the underlying program is funded. It's called a contingency fund, and by law, contingency fund can only flow when the underlying fund is flowing. So, for example, if today the Democrats say, "Oh, never mind, sorry, we'll open the government," and SNAP flows, Hurricane Melissa or one of the hurricanes hits, that's the contingency fund that we would use to send more money into the vulnerable communities that are harmed by a specific event like a hurricane. But it is a contingency fund that can only flow if the underlying appropriation is approved. And listen, even if it could flow, it doesn't even cover half of the month of November. So here we are again in 2 weeks having the exact same conversation.
I'll just add to that. The Democrats are lying about that, and I think they know that. Some of the ones who are out saying it are actually attorneys. They can read the black letter law themselves. They've even filed a lawsuit, you saw, to try to do it. Why? Because they wanted a talking point. They know that's a frivolous piece of litigation. They know they're going to lose, but they also know it'll take many weeks or months to have that ultimately determined by a court because of the way the justice system works. So they're using it as a talking point to try to claim. I believe they know for a fact that what they filed in the court is false. You know, they're lawmakers. They're supposed to know how the law works. And so the whole thing is just shameful. And they're using the people as pawns in this game. That underlying fund that the Secretary just addressed was unfunded by the Democrats themselves when they voted against the CR. The CR would have kept all this funded, and they chose not to do it. Not once, not twice. 13 times in the Senate, once in the House, 14 overall. Yes, sir.
I'm sure you saw President Trump's tweet last night suggesting that it's time for Senate Republicans to blow up the filibuster in order to get the continuing resolution passed. I know in the past you've been reluctant to encourage your Senate colleagues to do that or not. Are you aligned with the President now that it's time for them to take this dramatic step to reopen the government?
I haven't. The President's been very busy. He was in Asia doing all these trade agreements. I've been a little busy, as you know. We haven't spoken since he returned. I sent him a text earlier this morning. I saw that as well. What you're seeing is an expression of the President's anger at the situation. He is as angry as I am and the American people are about this madness. And he just desperately wants the government to be reopened so that all these resources can flow to the people who need it so much. Look, I'll just say this in general. As I've said many times about the filibuster, it's not my call. I don't have a say in this. It's a Senate chamber issue. We don't have that in the House, as you know. But the filibuster has traditionally been viewed as a very important safeguard. If the shoe is on the other foot, I don't think our team would like it. The Democrats, look, they've said what they would do. They would pack the Supreme Court. They would make Puerto Rico and D.C. states. They would ban firearms. They would do all sorts of things that would be very harmful for the country. And the safeguard in the Senate has always been the filibuster. But again, not my issue, not something I get to even weigh in on. My opinion on this is not relevant. It's the senators. But I think that it just is another expression of the frustration, of the pressure that is being felt, the anger by the President and by me and all of us that we're in this situation at all. Do your basic job. I'm going to say this again. We have put zero Republican policy priorities on the CR. It is Biden-level policies and spending. They have no excuse at all not to support it. They have no excuse to put all this pain on the American people, except that for what we've just articulated and repeated here every day, they want to give a showing to the radical left fringes of their base, and they want to give illegal benefits or benefits back to illegal aliens and non-citizens and all the other crazy stuff that they've claimed. Yeah.
Can I respond?
Sure.
I just very quickly, I have not spoken to the President either since last night, but let me say this. He is, and I've been next to him for almost 9 or 10 years now. He is so resolutely focused on delivering for the American people all day, every day, 7 days a week, 20 hours a day. This is what he is thinking about. And as the world's greatest deal maker, from his perspective, the way he thinks out of the box as a businessman is how do we end this nonsense, and how do we again open the government, and how do we support these families that need support?
Madam Secretary.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd already called on him. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Madam Secretary, question to you. So I know you addressed the contingency fund, but SNAP has never run out of funding in its 60-year history, even during shutdown. Why were past administrations able to find funding to keep it afloat in a shutdown that you can't?
Well, let me see. I've got a chart I want to show you all on the SNAP funding. My charts are slightly wanky because our print shop is closed because we're furloughed. So it was a little arts and crafts time over at USDA early this morning. So this is the chart of the SNAP program. Now, I know everyone can't see this, but this goes back to October of 2023. And I want everyone to follow. This is the red line that under Joe Biden, you see an almost 30% increase in the cost of the SNAP program over the 4 years that President Biden and the USDA was overseeing it with Congress funding it. And you see now the downward trend since President Trump was reelected November, and we've had about 650,000 people move off of SNAP since President Trump was elected. A press conference for another time. That's obviously the goal of all these programs, is to move families into real work and the dignity of that. I say that because the astronomical costs of the SNAP program under Joe Biden was historical. It was unprecedented, and we don't have the same levels of funding that were there in the past. And by the way, for 1 month, we have band-aided and bubble-gummed and duct-taped this deal to get this 1 month of funding in for SNAP, the $9 billion.
Madam Secretary, quick follow-up. I mean, because reality is setting in for a lot of people this weekend. So what do you say to the millions of people who stand to lose their food stamp benefits? What should they do?
My message to America is first, the fact that your government is failing you right now. That poverty is not red or blue. It is not a Republican or Democrat issue. It doesn't matter who you voted for or even if you voted. That if you are in a position where you can't feed your family and you're relying on that $187 a month for an average family in the SNAP program, that we have failed you. But I think what's so important, and this is why we keep hammering this, the Republicans have voted over and over and over again to open this government so that these funds don't stop. And for 14 different times, the Democrats have said, no, we are going to hold hostage the most vulnerable families in this country so that we can get our left-wing radical agenda into the government and the governing structure. And to that, President Trump, Speaker Johnson, Majority Leader Thune have said absolutely not, and we're very grateful for that. Please vote yes. We implore the Democrats in the Senate to vote yes to get this government open and these people the benefits that they need to feed their families.
And it's clarified. When she says we have failed you, she means we, the Democrats, okay? Because as we've just explained, Republicans have voted 14 times to get this done. The president has pleaded with Schumer and Hakeem to open the government, and they told him no. We're doing everything we can. The Republicans, they say, well, the Republicans are in charge of the federal government. Why can't they get this done? It's simple math. We need 60 votes in the Senate. We only have 53 Republicans. We have to have Democrats. It is the Democrats alone who are failing the American people. And this administration, every cabinet secretary, it's not just Secretary Rollins, every cabinet secretary is bending over backwards to make sure that the American people are served and they get what they need. But we are not magicians. We cannot wave a magic wand. The funds have run out because the Democrats are playing games. And that's why we've been here every day this month pleading with them to do the right thing, and they do not care. They have shown how callous they are. They do not care that people are suffering. And that's who's failed them. It's not the government overall. It's the Democrats who are holding up the government for working for the people. It's a very important thing. Jay, go ahead.
You undoubtedly have seen some of the modest progress in the Senate. At least people are talking about spending, 26 spending. Number one, I want to get your sense for where things are, your reaction to that, and would you shake the House back if they got some sort of agreement on a number of spending bills?
Yeah, look, the whole point of this is a very important reminder. The reason we're in this mess is because they voted against the clean CR. What was the point of the CR? The CR was merely to buy us 7 additional weeks to finish the funding of the government, the appropriations process. We were working on that in bipartisan fashion and bicameral fashion. As you know, we had a conference committee set to go on 3 appropriations bills that had passed out of the House. They didn't match the Senate exactly. They were going to work through that. That's the process. And our appropriators, the members of Congress who work on all this funding every day, are raring to go. In both parties, in both chambers, they want to get back to that work, and that is the whole point. Chuck Schumer and the leadership are holding that process up. So am I optimistic that we can get back to that? Yes, but we can't do any of it until they take the simple step to vote on that additional time. It's just a stopgap funding measure to make all these services and funding flow to the people so that we can finish that work. They're holding it up. So I'm heartened, Jake, that we have members on both sides. I had a meeting with the chairman of our Appropriations Committee in my office yesterday afternoon. Tom Cole came in. We were talking about the latest and what those appropriators are doing, the things they're working on. I meet with Leader Thune about it almost daily on the subject. We are ready. The next packages of funding bills are being prepared. And yes, we want to pass that off the House as soon as possible. We want to get all 12 appropriations bills done because we're returning to the regular order. That's been a commitment of mine since I became the Speaker 2 years ago, and it's something that Congress must do to be better stewards of taxpayer dollars. So we don't have, I'm using your handy chart here, so we don't have this spike in spending. We have more responsible spending. The only way to get this, to make the government work better and more efficiently for the people, is to go through that stewardship process, that important obligation that the founders intended and that we have used to respect, but we haven't in a long time. So all of this is entwined in that. We've got to get Congress working again. We're anxious to do it, and the sooner we can get back here and get the lights on, the better. But the number one mission of Congress right now is to turn the government back on. There's too many people's lives and health and hunger at stake. This is not a game. They've got to stop playing games. Remember this, too. The first time in U.S. history that any party has had the audacity to do what the Democrats and the Senate are doing right now. No one ever before has shut the government down over a clean, nonpartisan CR, because it would have been unthinkable until now. And you need to remind them of that. Yes, ma'am. Last one.
The One Big Beautiful Bill contained numerous Medicaid anti-fraud measures. Senator Tuberville recently highlighted a slew of aliens who are receiving these SNAP benefits. Are there any plans to do the same with SNAP and totally reform it just to ensure that it's available only to U.S. citizens?
You want to?
Yes, in fact, we've already done that. Now, so a couple of quick things on I guess the silver lining in all of this is that we're having a national conversation on our SNAP program, that this has sort of shined a light on a program that, especially under the last administration, has just become so bloated, so broken, so dysfunctional, so corrupt that it is astonishing when you dig in. So 3 important things on that. The first, I talked about the extraordinary explosion of benefits under the last administration. And what happened was that the money that was going out was zero accountability. So one of the very first things we did when I was sworn in was send a letter to all the states and to remind everyone the SNAP program is administered through the states and the governor's office. So send a letter to all the states saying no more illegal aliens on SNAP, period, full stop. So that's already a rule of this administration. We're working to enforce it every single day. The second thing is we began a very serious investigation into a lot of the fraud and abuse that we kept getting anecdotal stories of that no one was doing anything about. And so just in the last, I think, 6 months, we've had major dozens of arrests, people going to jail, fraudulent activity of 50 million here. One guy's registered for SNAP in 6 different states. I mean, it's one thing after another. So we are taking that extremely, extremely seriously. And we'll continue to do so. And then the third thing on this is that for the first time ever, we, the USDA, has asked the states for their data so that we can ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately. Not surprisingly, all of the red states said, yes, please help us with this. We want to do the right thing. We want to make sure there's not all this corruption and fraud. By the way, 2 blue state-led governors also leaned in, Colorado and North Carolina, alongside every one of the red governors. But the other blue states, California, Oregon, New York, Washington, all of them actually sued us and said, oh no, we're not going to give you any data. So the problem is you have an extremely corrupt program, but up until this administration and with President Trump's direct focus on this and making sure every taxpayer dollar is spent appropriately, we've never really had the opportunity to dig in. So we're going to be talking a lot more about SNAP reform. We've got a lot of people listening now, which is very, very helpful, and to take that program back to its original intent of helping those who are truly needy in our communities, but not to have a massive welfare benefit where so many people are taking advantage of it that shouldn't be.
And I just want to add briefly, just zoom out a little bit. This is a stark contrast between the 2 parties, the 2 major parties in this country. We talk about the split screen in here very often. On this issue, with regard to reducing fraud, waste, and abuse in government, look, America is the greatest nation in the history of the world. We're the most powerful, most successful, most free, most benevolent nation that's ever been. Part of our benevolence, part of the spirit of America is that we do have these safety net programs. We support that. We have an extraordinary cabinet, like Brooke Rollins here, Secretary Rollins, who is handling and administrating the SNAP program is a good example of that. Medicaid is a good example. Why were they designed and why are they so important and why do we all support those ideas? Because sometimes people really can't take care of themselves. You know, you have the elderly, the disabled, young pregnant women, for example, who are single and they're down on their luck and they need some help. SNAP and Medicaid and these other programs were intended to be a temporary safety net to help people to get back on their feet. But they have been abused. And there are some big government advocates like the Marxists, like the socialists, who want the government to take over everything and supply everything for everybody. But guess what? If the government can give you everything, it can take it away as well, and your freedom is sacrificed. Socialism, don't get me started, has been a great scourge on humanity. I mean, the tens of millions of innocent people in the 20th century alone have died because of it. America stands for something better than that, something different. But the programs don't work if they're loaded down with fraud and abuse. And every single person in this room and every American of common sense should understand the necessity of having people in office, a president in the White House, a cabinet full of secretaries who are dedicated to this in every division of the federal government, and Republicans in Congress leading on this, to root out that fraud, waste, and abuse so the programs can survive. We did that in the One Big Beautiful Bill, in the Working Families Tax Cut. With Medicaid, we went into that and we eliminated the fraud, waste, and abuse. We got able-bodied young men without dependents off the program. They were never intended to be there. They're sitting around on their couches playing video games. Yes, that's an actual study, and they're siphoning the resources away from elderly people, disabled people, and young women who desperately need it. And so the funds were being depleted. We shouldn't go for that. And illegal aliens were never intended to be on any of these programs. They're for U.S. citizens only, law-abiding citizens. This is the team. The Republicans will fix that and save those programs for the country. And the Democrats will continue to abuse it. They sued the USDA for simply asking them to tell them how many illegal aliens are on the programs in California and New York and these other states. They sued them. You need to take account of what people are doing here in each party, the leaders and the President of the United States. We are trying to get government to work more efficiently and effectively for the people, and we are getting stopped and hindered by political games by Democrats. And that's why we're so frustrated. It's got to come to an end. Thank you all for being here this morning.
Thank you, everyone.